Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. James here from Embark, and today I want to talk to you about communication, but specifically in regards to creative people. So for me, one of the most frequent issues that I see around me in everyday life is a lack of communication or a lack of communication skills. And today I want to talk specifically about communication when it comes to creative people. Most creatives, from my experience, want to spend their time on their passion. They want to spend their time working on their craft, creating, which is what they love to do. They just want to spend their time doing that. Creatives have normally one or more outlets for their creativity, and they love honing those skills and being disciplined and just playing and having fun and having the freedom to play around and be creative in any way they see fit. Some creatives have been lucky enough or good enough, based on the market, to actually be paid for their creativity, get paid for what they love to do. And some creatives have turned their passion into a business. In my experience, a lot of creatives have actually fallen into entrepreneurship as a creative. Maybe they were creative recreationally and a friend or a family member told them, like, hey, this is really good, you could sell this as a product or a service. Or maybe they just wanted to make a little bit of extra money on the side. Either way, that's how I found that a lot of creative people end up finding themselves into entrepreneurship. And some creatives have a really good product or service because they spend so much time on their craft. So what they create is fantastic, but they have sometimes an issue with conveying that to other people, conveying the value that brings. So when I talk about communication, I'm not just talking about verbal communication. I'm talking about written communication, I'm talking about internal communication, and I'm talking about visual communication as well. So we're going to be looking at all four of those types of communication. We'll do two in this video and two in another video. I think all of them individually are very important, but put them together and someone with all four of those skills, with those communication skills, there's going to be a huge positive upside that they're going to be able to attain through that communication. And I think that's the key thing to think about if you're going to watch both of these videos. Think about as a collective all four skills together, and how that's going to affect your life if you are that good at communication. So the first type of communication I want to think about is internal communication. So by internal, I mean literally the voice in your head. You might not think that you're communicating frequently with it, but you actually are. It's probably the thing that you talk to the most or communicate with the most. There's a constant internal dialogue going on, and some of it's unconscious and some of it's conscious. You might bounce ideas off yourself, you might big yourself up just before you go into a meeting or something like that. You'll actually talk to yourself and get yourself motivated. So sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's conscious. But I think even if it's unconscious, I think you should try and hone in and listen to it, even if it's unconscious. I know that sounds cliche, but I believe that if you pay more attention to your internal dialogue, there are hidden cues and hidden things that you'll learn about yourself and others. So it's almost like this information that's locked away. And if you spend a little bit more time communicating and listening to that internal dialogue, there's a lot of fruits to be had. Now, if you listen to it, it doesn't mean that you have to do what it says. You know, don't blindly just do whatever your unconscious is saying, because sometimes it's there for a reason. It's just working out what you want to do next in the back of your head. So you don't have to constantly just go out and be impulsive based on this little niggling voice in the back of your head. Give it a listen, think, and then decide for yourself what you want to do. But let that be another voice into your decision making. I find once you've listened to yourself more, feelings, thoughts, ideas, everything becomes much clearer. And after all, how can you expect to communicate well with other people if you can't even communicate with yourself? In hindsight, we understand this, but very few people get there on their own accord. Being real and clear with myself, setting boundaries, rules, and having certain morals have all helped me to become a clear communicator. I know exactly how I feel and think when it comes to certain subjects, and I can articulate that quite well. This is due to a well-versed internal communication and internal dialogue. I pay attention, I look, and I refine my thoughts over time. This might sound intriguing, or it might sound like I'm chatting a load of rubbish, but regardless, it's easy to start doing once you're aware of it. As a creative person, you might not care that much for communication, but if you're going to look to monetize your talent, then you're going to have to start training communication as a skill with internal dialogue in the forefront. If you're not sure how to start, then start by writing things down first. If you write things down in a notepad, it's going to help your thoughts become much clearer. This is why journaling is so powerful, because you're forced to write concisely. You have to get your thoughts concise beforehand. So write stuff down beforehand, get it concise, and that will give you a clearer perspective. Writing things down is a great way to bring up emotions and display them visually. Therefore, I would suggest you write out a business plan for your creative business. Don't give it too much thought, and don't think that anyone else is going to see it. This is purely for you. Write down 1 to 3 pages discussing what the business is, how it's going, marketing, delivering value, how you're going to create the product, all those sort of things, and just write it down, but just remember it's just for you. This is less about creating a business plan and more about creating an internal dialogue that you can use later on to help you communicate better. Stick to answering these few questions. What is the product or service? Who are you going to sell it to? Where are you going to find customers? And what does your business look like in 5 years' time? Just let your ideas flow and ramble. Remember, this is for you and no one else. It's for you and your unconscious to bounce ideas off of one another and help you become clear on your goals. Once you've started paying attention internally and communicating effectively with yourself, this skill will translate across to verbal and visual and written communication as well. I believe internal communication leads to harmonious communication. So the second type of communication I want to look at today is written communication. This is another really important aspect of communication, and it's one that you should try and work on constantly in anything you write, no matter whether that's something like a blog post or even if it's just something small like a text to a friend. Make sure you're constantly thinking about written communication and the language you use and the way you form sentences, always aiming to have no mistakes in terms of communication. You don't want to allow for anything to be misconstrued. Make it your goal to have less and less miscommunication with people every single month. Constantly think about making sure that there is nothing left to chance. What you say is what you mean, and that's how they're going to take it when they read it. You've always got to be thinking about the other person and what they're going to be reading and what they're going to be taking from your words, from the language you use. This consistent practice will lead to an increase in written communication skills, and that's really important if you are a creative and you're looking to sell a product or a service in the future. This comes from copywriting, this goes to any sort of communication like that. Obviously, there's people you can pay and they can come in and do it for you. But if you're starting up and you're going to be in-house doing everything yourself, then written communication is really important for blog posts, social media, everything like that. So, what is good written communication? What does it look like? Well, you've probably had it before where you've miscommunicated with a friend, and the crux of the issue mostly comes down to interpretation. This is hard to convey when written, so think text message. This is because when you're reading a text, there's no visual communication in the forms of facial expressions or body language. So everything you have to go on, everything that you have to think about when you're reading a text, the tone, the interpretation, everything is just based on the words alone and nothing else. This leads to people miscommunicating in messages all the time and misinterpreting what someone said. These same conversations, if they had been in person, would have been easy to do with visual communication. There would have been no misinterpretations at all. I like to think of good written communication being that whatever you've written is going to be interpreted by the other person, by the reader, no other way than the one that you intended it to be. So it can't possibly be interpreted any other way. The way you wrote it and the way you wanted it to be interpreted is the way it will be interpreted based on the writing. Write what you mean exactly. Write coherently and write logically. Lead people naturally, point to point, with clarification all the way through. Read over what you've written before you send it out there and try and clarify anything that you could see be a potential misinterpretation. Make sure you make all the points you want to fully, leaving nothing to imagination. Make sure points are relevant to what you're discussing so as to not confuse the reader. Lastly, I believe tone is very important in written communication. Therefore, choose your words very, very carefully. Choose the language you use very carefully. If you want to be polite, be polite. If you need to be forceful, make sure the language you use is appropriate to get that tone across to the reader. So guys, that's internal communication and written communication. That's the two communications we're going to go through today for this episode, and in part 2 we're going to look at 2 more types of communication to complete the set. Hope you guys enjoyed that lesson. If you did, please drop a like, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have new episodes here once or twice a week, so if you are new, please make sure to subscribe. I've been James from Embark. Hope to see you guys again soon. Ciao.